Hey, St. John, this is Pastor Adam. And before we get into today's interview, I want to let you know that I'm going to be speaking with Jake and Hannah Dietrich. Jake is the chair for the Exploratory School Committee, and Hannah, his wife, is a first grade teacher up at St. John's in Marysville. And so they moved to the Columbus area back in 2019, and they have quite a bit of Lutheran teachers and educators in their family and have been formed by Lutheran schools in a variety of ways. And so I appreciate hearing both of their perspectives in the conversation, and should just further help us all as we continue to weigh this motion that's been put before the congregation about hiring a school planter / principal. So I hope you enjoy the conversation. Here we go. Hey, St. John, this is Pastor Adam, and today I'm sitting down for another one of these interviews, and this time I have two guests on the phone. I have Jake and Hannah Dietrich. Jake, Hannah, how you two doing?
We're good, thank you.
Great, thanks.
Awesome. Well, the reason I have you both on the phone is for a couple different reasons. One, Jake has been our chair of our Exploratory School Committee, so he's been leading our endeavors, harnessing our meetings, and just keeping the group moving along in a good fashion. And Hannah teaches first grade up at St. John's in Marysville, so she's a Lutheran school teacher. And so maybe a way to get into this discussion is, how long have you been here at St. John? I'm trying to remember.
So we moved to Columbus in the fall of 2019, and I was pregnant at the time with our daughter Gracie, and I started working at St. John that January as a preschool teacher. But we shut down a couple months after I started due to COVID. But yeah, we have been there for 3 years now.
Yeah, that's right. You had taught our young threes class here at St. John in Dublin, and that was, so the beginning of 2020. So yeah, you didn't teach too long here before the pandemic kind of ended that school year. Before you came to the Columbus area, you were out in Indiana, and what was that church experience like?
Yeah, so when Hannah and I met, we were a part of a new church site plant for what was Carmel Lutheran Church on the north side of Indianapolis, and is now Cornerstone Lutheran Church. As they were expanding, we were part of the kind of founding group of folks that implemented a downtown Indianapolis site. We knew that there were no good Lutheran church options in downtown Indianapolis, and thought it was a great ministry opportunity that Cornerstone was uniquely equipped to lead.
And I happen to know some of the staff out there, and you had a vicar at the time named Victor. So you had a vicar Victor.
That's right.
Yeah, he's now pastor, but yeah, that's always nice. Well, good. And you guys came out here, and Hannah started teaching in the preschool here for a limited time. Pandemic hits, and then eventually Hannah's over at St. John's in Marysville. And how many years have you been teaching first grade there?
I'm in my second year teaching first grade.
So a while ago, I approached you guys about considering being a part of this Exploratory School Committee. And what were your thoughts of that idea back then?
Well, the first thought was an immediate yes, of course. Why would we not? I remember when we moved here, we were kind of surprised that there were no Columbus Lutheran schools, and the Indiana district has a ton of Lutheran schools, specifically in Indianapolis. And so we were all for starting one up here too.
And if I remember right, you both your parents are Lutheran school teachers. Is that right?
Yeah, so my mom is a Lutheran school teacher. And I have other kind of aunts and uncles that are, and grandparents that are, and Hannah's grandpa was a Lutheran school teacher as well.
Yeah, my parents are not, but most of my aunts and uncles are, and my grandpa and grandma were, but my grandpa was the district exec for the Indiana district pretty much the whole time I was growing up.
Jake, we talked a while back when this committee was being formed and asking you to consider taking the lead on on this exploratory committee. What was some of your thought and consideration into taking up that task?
Well, first, I was honored that you would ask me to do so, and especially given the fact that, I'm not an educator, and while I have some perspective, having grown up with a Lutheran educator in my household, I don't have that kind of direct experience. But I think you saw my profession being a real estate developer and kind of finding opportunities and seizing opportunities as a good maybe segue towards this endeavor to try to understand the feasibility of a school and understand the steps that would be necessary to implement it.
So, Hannah, you mentioned some of your surprise arriving here and seeing that there weren't Lutheran schools in the Columbus area proper, but the one out in Marysville. Why still make the drive out to Marysville and teach in a Lutheran school day in and day out?
Well, I went to Concordia, Chicago for college. I graduated with my Lutheran teacher diploma, and I have mostly taught in Lutheran schools. I taught in a couple in Indiana, both in kindergarten, and then I also had some experience as a public school preschool teacher. And there's really nothing like a Lutheran school. It's so unique. It's really where I feel like I belong, and I was called to find one. Turns out that the closest one was half an hour away, but it is so worth the drive. It wasn't a really hard decision for me to try to work there too.
And so part of being a Lutheran school teacher is just the regular rigors of academics, but also the religion classes. Can you tell me more about what those are like?
Yeah, so we cover in religion class, which is how I always start my day. We cover various Bible stories, of course, and we connect those to the catechism and to different parts of the worship service. But also beyond just the quote unquote religion part of our day, we integrate that into every part of our subjects and all of the other things that I teach. As a first grade teacher, I am constantly bombarded with random questions that kids are thinking about, and the questions that they come up with from our conversations in the morning throughout the whole day, and the connections that they make just about our Bible stories or about concepts that we've been working on in religion. It's really cool, and it's a great opportunity for me to demonstrate the connections, for me to ask our pastor at Pastor Jack in Marysville to come in and talk to the kids about it, to pray about it, and it just kind of integrates itself into every part of our school day, and then of course beyond that too.
I think that's one thing it's always neat about a Lutheran school is having that direct involvement with the church, having the pastors around and other church workers, and just that mutual sharing in the mission of sharing Christ.
Yeah, definitely. Just being able to pray with the students or to have them pray for and with each other beyond the conversations. It's a really cool community that we can create.
And so in addition to the religion classes, you got to teach math and writing, and they're first graders, so they typically don't come in reading, right? That's part of your test during the year. What are, the educational standards like when you teach?
So I would say that Lutheran schools are pretty well known as holding academic excellence and maintaining a certain quality. We do all of the state standards for Ohio that you would find at any other school. And I think we have high expectations and we produce pretty good results.
Good. And you also taught back in Indiana, is that right?
That's right.
Is that the same sort of experience you had there?
Mm-hmm. I think I did my student teaching at a Lutheran school in China, and it was the same thing there. It's just very high academic excellence, as well as just the relationship aspect of it.
So you taught out in China, and where was that again?
I student taught in Shanghai.
In Shanghai, yeah. We do have some Lutheran schools around the world. I knew there was one in Hong Kong. I didn't realize there was one in Shanghai, but there's even a network worldwide in our efforts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the cool part of Lutheran schools is how systematic it is and how connected you can be with. I already knew a couple teachers out in China, and before I got there, and because they had gone to Concordia with me.
We talked about religion classes. We talked about just the regular academics. What other blessings are there in being a part of a Lutheran school?
Well, I think a unique aspect of Lutheran schools is that unlike at a public school where the goal is to graduate and leave, it's almost the opposite where the goal is to not leave in a way, in a sense that you're bringing people into the church. You're bringing not just the student, but their whole family in an effort to keep them around, see them every week on Sundays and at least on Sundays. And to just be part of that community, form those relationships on a deeper, more personal level and a more family-based level.
Wonderful. Well, Jake, I haven't forgotten about you. You are the chair of this committee, and you led our efforts. And maybe you could describe a little bit for our listeners just some of the process and task for the committee. I know we'll do some of this in the town halls, but just things to make people aware of what was that like going through the exploratory school committee process.
What I would want to make sure that the listeners understand is that our school exploratory committee was formed at the executive council with the objective to not figure out how to start a Lutheran school, but to understand the feasibility of a Lutheran school at St. John. And so our kind of key objectives and tasks were all centered around that kind of analysis of the opportunity and whether or not St. John was fit for this type of mission opportunity. And so we spent over a year looking at other area private schools, examining the public schools before engaging the LCMS national office, with them helping us with putting together what they call a Genesis study, which is an independent person that they have on staff that comes into your environment and helps you understand and provides recommendations and feedback on whether your congregation is fit for starting a school. And so we thought those hypercritical or hyper important for us to do is to bring in an outsider's perspective. So it wasn't just our internal folks making those perceptions and those recommendations.
And that was something I appreciate about having our consultant's name was Stu, is he's done this for quite some time, and he has seen a lot of different churches and school startup efforts and different geography, different scenarios, different contexts, and just different areas of the country. And he would just tell us stories of things he would see. He would make recommendations against congregations starting a school. He'd make recommendations for congregations starting a school. He had a lot of background and perspective he brought with him.
Yeah. Nationally, having done these Genesis studies for years, but also being somebody that was a Lutheran school teacher and then administrator for decades as well, he definitely brought a wealth of perspective that was highly valuable to what we were doing.
And so after working with Stu through the Genesis study, we came up with this feasibility study, this feasibility report, and it's a pretty hefty document. We do plan to hand out copies at the town halls for those who attend. What would people find in that feasibility report you think they should draw their attention to?
Well, I think the Genesis study does a good job of bringing to light some things that people may perceive without, but it provides the data to it. So, for example, looking at demographics of the Columbus area, looking at growth patterns and just generally, the stats around us, which I think is kind of an important component of understanding just how high growth of an area in which we're located. It provides some color on what the other area private schools offer around the Columbus area. And then it drills into some results from some interviews, both in person and via congregational surveys of how people think about and what their thoughts are on the idea of starting a Lutheran school at St. John. And at the end of all of that, all those components, Sue provides various summaries and conclusions and recommendations on how to move forward. And one of those recommendations that's provided at the end of that study is to hire a administrator or facilitator to implement the school. And so that's what our committee really kind of identified as a critical next step in moving things forward with starting a school at St. John, is that we really need that quarterback to take up the ball and actually make things happen. And so that's why we made that recommendation to the executive council, and why that's why the motion is in front of the congregation here in a couple of weeks.
So it's not like a school would start tomorrow. There's still a ways to go, but that's why the motion is crafted the way it is, to get that school planter / principal who's going to be that, that hired person to keep things moving along.
That's right. While we believe that there is we as a committee believe there's viability to a school, we do not know what that looks like, what the right way is for that school to start. And so this person is really going to be the person that kind of establishes and implements that vision.
And I think that's one thing that's been a challenge. I mean, as a committee, for as long as we've been meeting, as we talk with the council and have been engaging with members of the congregation, as we've given some periodic updates, but especially since the motions come out, is, we might have ideas for answers to questions. You might actually have real answers to questions, but there's some of, well, we could go this way or that way, but it would be good to have that person in place to have that input, and this person who's gonna run that trail, and to hit those checkpoints. And I think that's one of the tough parts is it's so easy to get ahead of ourselves, and we had to just make sure we were focused on, so what is this committee's task? What's the motion before the congregation? And so part of the reasoning for the motion is to give a lot of responsibility to the school planter and principal, because there are decisions to be made. And as a committee, we've considered a lot of questions. We'll certainly have answers to questions, but we might also just have potential answers to questions, because it's just not quite the time to answer those things. And so we might have some options, but we really need that person in place to begin to decide, okay, here's the next step, here's what this will look like, and to see how this school idea could and can be brought about. Is that fair to say?
Definitely. And I think one thing that we also expect is that there's still going to be need for support from the congregation via volunteers and some sort of school startup task force that is going to help that principal or planter just understand how in what ways to implement the school.
Well, Jake, Hannah, I do appreciate our time together, but I think it is coming to a close. And before we do that, maybe if you could share some words of the congregation, maybe some encouragements or cautions for the members as they weigh this decision, and from your opinions and positions, what sort of recommendation would you have for St. John, and would you tell us a little more why?
Yeah, so I'm someone that was blessed to attend a Lutheran elementary school, and I can't speak highly enough of how impactful it was in rooting my life in Christ and kind of anchoring my whole perspective with just having that Lutheran education really kind of in those very early formative years. I think as parents of two young kids now, having had that perspective, we would want the same for our kids as well, and we would want the same opportunity for other children at St. John, and hopefully additional children throughout the community, that we would be able to connect to Christ. So while I think there's a lot of question marks, a lot of things yet to figure out, I think we can trust that God will lead us in the right way to figure out what this path forward looks like. And just would ask that everybody would prayerfully consider the motion that's before us, and then should that be passed, to just really pray for the right person to join this team and taking advantage of this great opportunity.
As a teacher in a Lutheran school, I know and see every day how much of an impact it has on me and the students and their families. As I am teaching, I can set an example. My life, that's a big challenge of a teacher in a Lutheran school, is to live out exactly what you're telling your students and to be that example. Students are looking up to their teachers no matter what, but to be able to have that authority and the privilege of leading them and guiding them in Christ is just something that I don't want to take for granted. It is such a privilege. And I pray that we could give that blessing to other people who can be a part of the school at St. John.
Jake, Hannah, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. And I am sure that if members have questions, you'd be glad to talk with them and just give a good encouragement and consideration towards this motion.
Absolutely. And look forward to seeing hopefully many of these listeners at one of the town halls that's coming up.